Obukhovo in 10 minutes. Wake up! The door rattled from the outside. Dawn seeped through the compartment window, poking with its finger ray first at the mineral water bottle on the table, then at the book I had been reading yesterday, then at the door mirror, reflecting in it and breaking into fragments. The conductor, a pretty girl about 30 years old, smiled and chatted about life throughout the journey. I smiled back and stayed quiet. Women weren't part of the plan for this vacation. My head was heavy. I had dreamed some kind of devilry. Apparently the book that the crafty vendor had thrust at me on the platform had contributed to that considerably. "Take it, you won't regret it," the merchant assured me. "Novels are flying off the shelves." I really didn't regret it. An unknown author to me, Alex Protasov, had delivered something incredible. Of course, I'm an unsophisticated reader who doesn't seek revelations in paper pages. I read all kinds of things without particular pretensions and have no special preferences in literature. But the book shocked me and turned me inside out. The novel was about war. Like a whirlpool, it drew you in and dragged you to the bottom. Calling the genre military fiction or journalism would be wrong. Several plot lines intersected according to the number of characters. At first glance, they chaotically rushed in different directions, and only toward the end of the novel did the author's grandiose design become clear. A multi-dimensional philosophical parable about the meanings of war and life. Time layers intertwined, echoing in each other, the concentration of thoughts per page of text was dense. Interpretations were twofold. Turn it however you want. I swallowed 500 pages overnight and remained in a stupor until morning, digesting, driving the letters through my consciousness. Sparse information about the author on the last page: born, studied, worked. A blurry photograph of a man about 40, detached gaze, light gray hair. Curiously, I was traveling to the city where he was born, or rather to the small village of Rodniki, 20 kilometers to the south. I returned the linens and glasses to the conductor, wished her great passengers and good luck on her route. I wanted to leave the book in the compartment, but at the last moment changed my mind and stuck it in my travel bag pocket. The time was early. The station met me with silence and emptiness. I could have reached the village by bus, but it ran once a day, and I didn't want to wait until noon. Throwing the bag over my shoulder, I headed toward the exit from the station building. I went the short way through the forest, calculating that I would be there by 1 o'clock. This vacation was my first in the last 3 years. I was exhausted and tired like a dog. I didn't want sweet Turkish resorts, cheap Thai exotica, tour of Madrid. And most of all, I didn't want to participate in the divorce proceedings that my energetic buzzer Barbara had initiated. I was going to my homeland for the first time in 20 years. The forest was cool and dim, filled with the singing of birds and wind in the tree crowns. The air was so clean and tasty that you wanted to preserve it and export it in cans to gasoline-filled Moscow for sale. Pine needles, compressed into an elastic layer, bounced under my feet. The path beneath them had almost disappeared. Strange, surely no one walks from the village to the station now. I had covered half the distance in an hour and a half and sat down by a stream to rest. A bird chirped loudly in the branches, the twigs stirred. Here you could still encounter unafraid animals. Squirrels that jumped under your feet, moose coming out to houses, bears at the lake. I bent down to drink. The icy coolness made my teeth ache. Again rustling and cracking of branches. Straightening up sharply, I was stunned. By the trunk of a thick pine stood a person in SS uniform. I saw him simultaneously, clearly and blurrily, a torn jacket on the shoulder, a holster on the thigh, a daisy tucked behind an ear. The German bared his teeth in a vile smile, pointing the gun barrel at me, and disappeared. I shook my head to shake off the hallucination. The air before my eyes swayed and trembled like near a hot stove. "You've read too much," I scolded myself without malice. "You're seeing who knows what. I'll rest, get some sleep, get away from the hustle and bustle, and everything will be wonderful." I felt free for the first time in many years. I turned on music in my player to make walking easier. Zemfira flowed viscously, enveloping consciousness and dictating rhythm to my steps. I want nothing, buzzer. I'm like a dried puddle, and in my heart it's completely empty and cold. The village emerged from the thicket like an apple rolling onto a palm. The forest approached it closely, threatening to flood it with greenery to swallow the houses. The streets were deserted. Somewhere in the distance a dog was barking, so not everyone had left Rodniki yet. I walked through the burdock-overgrown streets of my childhood. Right here, near the former club, we boys measured strength wall to wall. At the well I waited for the girl I had been friends with for 5 long years. And into Grandfather Pantelet's garden the children made raids on moonlit nights. I still remember the taste of apples from his garden, heavy, honey-sweet, melting in your mouth. Grandpa got angry and shouted after us that he would catch us and pull our legs out, but he didn't even go complain to our parents. Branches with apples from childhood hung heavily over the fence. I reached to pick one. Again stealing Misha. The voice, unchanged over the passing time, made me jump in place like a mischievous boy. Grandfather Pantelet slowly shuffled toward me from the depths of the garden. "How old is this unbending old man?" "Well, you've returned, prodigal son," the grandfather asked with a sly smirk. "I've returned, Pantelet Vasilievich. The roots are pulling, apparently." "Well, what can you do? You've grown attached to these roots. Where can you go from them?" And the old man lovingly stroked the rough bark of the nearest apple tree. Some devilry. It seemed to me that the tree leaned toward Grandpa and rubbed its trunk against his palm like a huge dog. "We've become completely orphaned here, that's what." The old man looked at me sadly through the curtain of branches, resembling the god Pan. "Everyone scattered in different directions. The village is going deaf like a stagnant pond. Fish seek where it's deeper." I helplessly spread my hands. "Not where it's deeper," Pantelet got angry, "but where it's easier. You're coming to an end in your cities, and then you look for roots, but it's too late." Then he added hastily, "Well, go on, you must be impatient." The house from childhood stood strong and straight. The fence had sagged, leaves had covered the well, the yard had grown over with nettle as tall as a person. The window openings looked at me sadly with broken glass, but the roof was intact. The massive logs of the frame had only slightly covered with moss. After burying her husband, Grandmother Anastasia flatly refused to move to the city. But she didn't outlive Grandfather for long. She passed away in autumn following him. Mother and Father went to the States, as we thought briefly, but it turned out differently. And I, a torn leaf from a branch, suddenly wanted to stick to my tree. Inside, everything remained as I remembered it in the distant past. My old soccer ball lay on the bed. I removed glass fragments from the frames so as not to cut myself, opened the windows wide so that the present would burst into the rooms. From the wall in photographs, young Grandfather and Grandmother smiled at me. Grandfather was in military uniform, returned alive from the Great Patriotic War. I cleaned the well as best I could, mowed the grass under the windows, threw out garbage, checked the inventory in the shed. Everything was in place. And who here would steal anything from neighbors? Such things had never happened. No one locked their doors. The bedding found in the dresser was yellow with age and smelled slightly musty. I took it out to air in the yard. I'll wash it later. I sat on the steps and smoked with pleasure. Mikhail, the father of my school friend Sandy Fichtestov, was looking over the fence. It's me, Uncle Ivan. Here I wanted to see my own. I'll go to the graves. Hopefully it's not too late. It's never too late for your own. We smoked and talked. About 100 people lived in the village at most, mainly old people. They traveled to neighboring Obukhovo for groceries on horses and motorcycles, where there was still a store, or to the city. Pensions were brought once a month, given to the old people by hand. Another couple dozen years and there will be no village, Ivan said with bitterness. The forest will swallow it. You come by, we'll give you potatoes, otherwise how will you survive? I brought supplies, won't perish, I nodded vaguely. If needed, I'll run to the city. We've had a writer living here for 3 years. The old man continued the conversation eagerly, pleased with a fresh person. Maybe you too, Misha, will move here. Bring a woman, children, or at least come for the summer. It's quiet here, good. He looked into my eyes pleadingly like a homeless dog. I nodded and agreed, yes, it would be wonderful. Finally, Uncle Vanya left, taking from me a promise to come for potatoes and fishing rods. I planned to go to the graves of my old folks the next day. The night before, I couldn't fall asleep for a long time in this transparent silence, only the sound of wind and cricket chirping. The photographs on the monuments had faded and almost merged with the stone, only the eyes stood out. Grandfather looked stern and sad, as if asking, "Well, how are you there, grandson?" "Everything's fine, Grandpa." I rubbed my palm against my eye that had teared up in the wind. I studied, got married, got divorced. Haven't had children by 40 years old, but everything else over the top. "You're a fool, Miss Hanya," Grandfather chuckled good-naturedly from the photograph. From surprise, I stumbled over the shovel I had brought to tend the graves and flew to the ground. "Careful!" the monument cried out. But it's not the photograph talking to me. Next to the grave stood an unfamiliar man, thin, straight as a stick with white hair, old like all the village inhabitants. He vaguely reminded me of someone, but of whom? Not killed. The voice was muffled and low. Spaced out, I answered embarrassedly, getting up from the ground and brushing off my knees. The stranger looked at me piercingly, with bright blue eyes, amazing for a wrinkled, withered face. "Alex," he introduced himself, extending his hand. I accepted the handshake and was surprised by the firm grip of his palm. We walked to my house, peacefully chatting. The old man turned out to be quite a talker. Seeing the broken windows, he whistled admiringly. "Need to put them in," he said businesslike. "In July there are torrential rains, for long, for a month, so you'll catch some downpours, no doubt about it. I have a couple of sheets and a glass cutter, stocked up for all occasions. If you want, come by. Do you have a tape measure to take measurements? I suppose I need to look for one. I can lend you a motorcycle for a trip to the city." Here the old man stumbled. On the windowsill lay the book I wanted to reread once more. "Have you read it?" He took it in his hands. "And how was it?" "Amazing," I said honestly. "Got true pleasure. I'll try to find this author's books when I return. Although he's from these parts, right?" The old man smirked. "That's me, Alex Protasov." I finally understood whom he reminded me of. Alex was a copy of the photograph from the book's frontispiece, aged about 30 years. I had already opened my mouth to ask a question, but Protasov beat me to it. "I invite you to dinner," he said ceremoniously, "in exactly 1 hour." We sat in wicker chairs on the veranda attached to Protasov's house, at a table covered with a tablecloth. Clay teapot, porcelain cups, hot pie fresh from the oven. Kill me, I don't remember who lived in this house at the end of the street before. And was there even a house? Shall we use first names? I suggested, so as not to get confused with pronouns. You can call me simply Misha. That works, especially since we're practically the same age. Alex. I sipped the hot willow herb tea and prepared to listen. And the story was shaping up to be quite interesting. As you've already understood, I was born in Rodniki, and I'm only 35 years old. My parents moved to St. Petersburg 30 years ago. Maybe that's why we didn't cross paths in our village past. When I turned 10, my mother died of a brain aneurysm. She knew about the diagnosis and lived with constant anticipation of departure. And she taught me to wait for death like a train turning. Leshka, we're all just drawn by someone like book characters. Don't worry, we'll see each other. I was still afraid, and waited. My father was crushed by mother's death more than I was. First he drowned his grief in work, then in vodka. I managed to enter Military Engineering University for software engineering and moved to a dorm. This was a mistake. Father drank himself to death in 6 months and hanged himself on the balcony on mother's birthday. Guilt, you know, I lived with it for a very long time. Yes, you can't control an adult person like a little puppy, but understanding this, you still gnaw at yourself and reproach yourself. Every day. I sold the apartment in St. Petersburg. Later, much later, I didn't wander long in my profession. I tried system administrator, beta tester, and database analyst. And then a friend asked me to help with proofreading. The person simply lacked literacy, but I wanted to help. Plus an idea appeared. I wrote a trip code for editing his novella. Let's not discuss technical questions for now, okay? I nodded and he continued. The novella was accepted by a decent publishing house, printed, my friend got good money, and I got to thinking, and wrote a war novel. I asked. Not exactly. I only outlined the main plot steps, names and character traits of heroes, and gave it to the machine. That is another code? Yes. Interesting. Literary monsters give drafts to their ghostwriters, keeping the glory for themselves. And you, what you read was created by a program, created perfectly right. But in some people this creativity causes certain discomfort, something like hallucinations. I remembered the SS man behind the pine. In the forest I saw a German. Everyone sees different things. Someone finds themselves on a battlefield, someone in a concentration camp, someone in Stalin's bunker, whoever gets lucky. On repeated reading, the effect can strengthen or weaken. I can't say what this teleportation into the past depends on. Curious. And other novels on what topics? I tried different things. Fantasy, detective, mysticism. I gave up on the last one after I fell into my own plot in a not very successful role. That's where the gray hair came from. The writer sighed and stroked the back of his head. Is your accelerated movement into decrepitude connected with this? I suggested. Alex sighed again. You see, the thing is, there in my wanderings through worlds I live life after life, really live, every year and day. My brain doesn't understand that time is illusory. It counts every moment spent there as a day or even a month. Too high density of being. But I don't regret a single minute because it's cool, unreally cool. And if I were offered to roll back time, I would step into this whirlpool again. Wait, that is, you immerse yourself, mentally, right, into your novel. Like into virtual reality. Alex shook his head negatively. No, just into reality. And it's just as bright, juicy, colorful, and filled with emotions and events as this one. Rather much brighter, do you understand? Readers can see only a glimpse of the created world, a reflection, ripples on water, fluctuation of essence. but I go much deeper and can wear any mask. King, dragon, troll, or Napoleon, I don't want to return. I looked at him intently to understand whether he was delirious. Do you think I've gone mad? He laughed. Do you suppose I traded my real life for an imagined one? I thought exactly that, but shrugged vaguely. Protasov smirked. Of course, he understood everything. Want to try? What exactly? I have the latest novel ready for loading. Why the latest? My time is running out. He looked at me so piercingly that I shivered. Alex tousled his gray hair, exposing his wrinkled forehead with scars. On a physiological level, I'm almost 90 years old, so I'll stay there. Where I'm 15, 40, or 1,000 years old. Do you understand? You're a programmer, right? Not particularly successful. I didn't want to share personal experiences. Just quietly swimming on the surface. But where will your body go if consciousness flies off to other worlds? It will evaporate or rot. Alex interrupted me. What's the difference? I won't have any connection left between body and consciousness. Come on, I'll show you how a plot trip is written. And one phrase will be enough for the code to start the flywheel of time and place where the flow will carry you. Want to see? Damn it, damn it. Yes, he's crazy, but I want to see this code. And I know what world I would create first. What the hell are you thinking, Miha? Fly. I didn't even turn around to understand that grandfather was standing behind my back. Oh, Grandpa, what advice you give me, however, I muttered. Was I an empty Rodniki now, or was I wandering through virtual surroundings of code not written by me? Had I met Grandfather Panteley, sat at the cemetery by the graves, inhaled the scents of the evening forest? Do I want to know the answers to these questions? The phone buzzed in my pocket, text from Barbara. Forgive me, fool, I was wrong. Let's start everything over. Not even a question mark, but a period. Too late, buzzer, to drink mineral water, too late. To change shoes, to change the mask of a roaring tiger for the soft purring of a cat. And factory smokestacks smoke, and you kiss me on the lips, and they promised rains from the south, but where are they? I remembered how she threw my things out the window, laptop, jeans, singing speaker. Good speaker. It sang even in flight. And dying on the lawn under the window until the rain extinguished the singing. We dissolve each other, buzzer, like acid or something worse, and we must carry this pain together glassy. And barges keep floating down the river, they're much older than me. But still, everyone will arrive somewhere, somewhere. I'm floating somewhere.
Hey friends, we've reached the end of this incredible journey together. Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed this audiobook, please subscribe to our YouTube channel, Book Beats. We're constantly uploading new audiobooks across all genres. So hit that subscribe button and you'll never miss your next great listen. Thanks again for being part of the Book Beats family. Until next time, happy listening, friends.